Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and today I want to explore something different that will affect every single person listening to this podcast. And that's the websites that track us as we browse and end up slowing down and damaging our web browsing experience. Because rightly or wrongly, every website has under 15 seconds to capture the attention of a visitor. However, according to Microsoft, the human attention span is now less than that of a goldfish at just 8 seconds. And it also takes about 5 seconds for users to form an opinion about your website. But let's add a little bit more pressure too. If your website doesn't load within 3 seconds, most users will completely abandon it. So today I invited Jeremy Tillman back onto the podcast from ad tracker experts Ghostery after hearing about their new research that reveals who's leading the pack and who's being left in the dust in the world of retail ad tech. Because Ghostery analysed the ad tracker stacks of the 12 largest retailers and measured the weight their trackers were actually putting on websites' performance and slowing down those web page load times. So come with me all the way to New York City so we can chat with Jeremy Tillman at Ghostery, who's going to tell us all about the report and much, much more. So a massive warm welcome back to the show, Jeremy. But can you tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do for anyone that missed our first conversation?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Jeremy Tillman. I'm the president of Ghostery, and we're a digital privacy company located in New York City.
And we last spoke way back on, I think it was episode 454. So for those new listeners that missed that first chat, if I remember correctly, Ghostery helps you browse smarter by giving you control over ads and tracking technology to actually speed up page loads, eliminate clutter, and ultimately protect your data. So what has changed since we last spoke, Jeremy? I mean, I saw you recently launched a new privacy tool. Does the fight for smart browsing continue, I would imagine?
Yeah, it continues into the 2020s. So from last time we talked, we launched a new product called Ghostery Midnight, and this is our first device-level privacy protection tool. And in the months since we last talked, one of the trends that we've been seeing over the past couple of years is the tracking from third-party companies and even the big tech giants like Facebook and Google. It's moved beyond the browser and onto device-level applications. And so we wanted to sort of break outside the browser to provide the same kind of privacy protection, but for the entire device. And that's what Ghostery Midnight does. It has application-level tracking protection. It has a VPN for people that are familiar with VPNs. And it's also a way to kind of control all your privacy protection for all your browsers from one place. So we think it's a more comprehensive protection that's not limited just to the browser.
And I think something else that's changed since we last spoke, I think you've obviously proved that you were slightly ahead of your time because privacy wasn't such a big deal when we first spoke. But now there seems to be this collective awareness all around the world, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a trend that we've seen over the past couple of years where there's a growing awareness of privacy. And, it's partly due to, a lot of the high profile privacy breaches, Cambridge Analytica being among them. But there's also a growing scrutiny of the business models of these big companies, Google and Facebook included, but also a lot of other companies as well, where, the media and by extension, I think the public are really starting to question, what are these companies doing with my data? How much are they collecting and why? So for a company like ours, where we've always given our users transparency into these practices and ultimately control over who they let collect their data, it's really been a great opportunity for us to be prominent in that conversation. Additionally, I think the GDPR and now the CCPA in California, it just kind of raises the stakes, right? So it's more often than not sort of front page headline grabbing topics, and it's really something that fits what Ghostery has always been about.
And one of the reasons I was excited to invite you back on the show was to walk through some of the recent research around AdTech. So can you set the scene and tell me more about the story behind that research and the kind of things that you unveiled there?
Yeah, so every single year, for the past 2 years anyway, and then going into the future, we've done a study called the Tracker Tax. And the Tracker Tax for 2019 focused specifically on the impact that trackers have on e-commerce companies. In the past, what we've looked at has been trying to quantify what is the hidden cost of these tracking technologies beyond just collecting your data. And in previous studies, we've shown that for consumers, these trackers, they actually meaningfully slow down your browsing experience, right? So the so-called tracker tax we found in the past, on average, for every tracker you add to a website, your page load speed goes down by a half second. And you can imagine for a lot of these websites, there are dozens and sometimes hundreds of trackers. So it really, really sort of robs you of a fast and easy to use user experience. This year, we wanted to see what was that hidden cost on business, because there's a similar relationship to these websites. If you're an e-commerce company, where the tracker tax, it slows down the page, which again is bad, but it actually costs you money if you're a business, because for every second longer it takes your website to load, more people are going to be bouncing from your site, and therefore you'll have fewer sales and less business. So in this 2019 tracker tax, we wanted to investigate that process in more detail. So we analyzed 12 of the top biggest e-commerce websites online, including websites like Walmart, Home Depot, Target, and tried to quantify what were the impact of their tracker ecosystems and how much money might that be costing them. So we went website to website. We used our new professional product, Go Street Insights, to do an in-depth analysis of these websites, and we're able to see, on average, how much time were these websites adding. And what we found is a website with no trackers, we analyzed them with all the tracking technologies blocked. Oftentimes they were, 1 to 2 or 3 seconds in terms of load time. But as soon as you activated their tracker ecosystems, that load time creeped up to 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds, which may not seem like a big gap, but the optimal load time for a website is 2 seconds. And for every second that you go beyond that 2 seconds, you're losing a big percentage of your conversions and your sales and your engagement. So our Tracker 2019 tax paper explores that in more detail and tries to determine, who are the biggest winners and losers in this. So for example, we found that Foot Locker had, with all their trackers implemented, a load time of almost 9 seconds, and added almost 5 seconds of load time between their fastest page load and their slowest page load, with all trackers blocked and no trackers blocked. And for them, that could lead to millions of dollars lost if their users are bouncing for each second that they've added to the site. So it's a really interesting study that's really tried to quantify what that hidden cost is to businesses, and try to emphasize the need for them not just to minimize the tracking technologies for user privacy and for user experience, but also to help their bottom line.
Whoa, some phenomenal stats in there. And I'm curious, after analysing ad tracker stacks of 12 of the largest retailers and measuring the weight of their trackers that were putting on site performance and page load time, who were the big winners?
So it's hard to say who the winners are, because everybody loses at least a little bit, but there's some companies that are better than others, I think. And a lot of it has to do with not just how many trackers they have, but how they have them implemented. So for example, we saw that Home Depot, Lowe's, and Target, they seem to have a more, I guess you could say, sophisticated approach, where they delayed the trackers firing until after the page was loaded. And we've seen that this helps them to load pages faster and probably retain as much of the revenue as possible. On the flip side, though, we saw companies like Foot Locker and Everlane perform much worse, where they were implementing them perhaps not just they have more trackers, but they were implementing them in a way that just increased overhead on their site and just slowed it down and made it much more sort of laggy and less responsive. So at the same time, they were all slower than what they would have been if they had zero trackers at all.
And I'm curious, was there anything that surprised you in the report? Because, I mean, you've been in this industry for some time now. I'm just curious if there was anything that stood out or actually took you by surprise.
Yeah, sometimes, when we see, on average, usually the more trackers you have, the slower the website is. It's a pretty direct relationship one-to-one. What's sometimes surprising is how much time these bigger companies have invested to maintain a lot of tracking technologies while trying to optimize their performance. So with these 12 websites, it wasn't always a one-to-one ratio of how many trackers they had and how slow the websites were, which is a little bit counter to the research that we've done before. When we look at thousands of websites across the web, the determining factor for these sites were not just how many there were, but how they were implemented. So I think it's a little bit surprising to see that at this level, it's really a matter of who's the most sophisticated and trying to squeeze out the most value from their trackers without bogging down their user experience.
And what do you think the implications are for retail leaders? Having looked at the results in this and based on those insights, what are the big takeaways and implications for you?
I think the implications for me is that there's this recognition in the industry that performance matters and that websites need to perform well for users to be satisfied and to want to stay and shop. And I think a big part of that is the influence of Amazon and as sort of like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because Amazon is a tremendous shopping experience. It's fast, it's convenient. So if you're trying to compete with Amazon, you have to make sure that your website is really, really fast. The difference, though, is Amazon also has a lot of data that they can collect on you directly if you're shopping there, almost 24/7. So these e-commerce companies, they have these competing incentives. The first is to, try and deliver a fast user experience. The other is to try and collect as much data as possible to, squeeze as much revenue from targeting and retargeting and personalization. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from the study is if you're not Amazon, you need to do a careful analysis of your website and balance the two, and really balance the costs of these tracker ecosystem against the performance of your website. And sometimes the right answer is to track less and to have fewer of these technologies, and to, on the other side, have the faster experience that leads to more sales and conversions. So it's a case-by-case basis, but I do think that's the biggest takeaway from the study.
And for the average user that's listening that wants that 2-second experience of that site loading super quick rather than 9 seconds or even more, can you tell me a little bit more about how Ghostery can actually help them browse smarter and regain control over ads and tracking technology to ultimately speed up loads and protect their data?
Yeah, the ironic thing is that Ghostery users that go to these e-commerce websites have amazing user experiences because the sites load lightning fast. Once you block these tracking technologies, they load in 2 to 3 seconds. And, our tool it tells you what the page load time is. So you have a sense of, how much time you're saving. But you can go to Foot Locker and Everlane. And even though for the average person without Ghostery, it loads really slowly, with Ghostery, it's lightning fast. So ironically, Foot Locker may be collecting less data about you, but may actually be getting more money from you if you stick around longer and buy more of their stuff. So, it's, with this study, it's the Ghostery users are the exception, not the rule.
Fantastic. And looking forward, if we dare to look forward, we're already in 2020 and in a whole new decade. But what's next for Ghostery? Is there anything else you can share about what excites you about the road ahead?
Yeah, so we're still exploring ways to move beyond the browser. And, in 2020, Ghostery Midnight is going to be a big part of our step forward. And right now that's available for Mac OS and for Windows. And we'll be looking for ways to expand Ghostery to mobile devices as well. So, our goal going into the 2020s is to provide privacy protection wherever users connect to the internet. And increasingly that's happening more and more in your mobile devices and even in IoT devices. And that's where Ghostery wants to be going forward.
Excellent. And for anyone listening that would like to just read a little bit more about Ghostery or even give it a try and just see how they get on with it, what's the best way of doing that? And equally contacting your team if they are left with any questions.
Yeah, you can go to ghostery.com, and it has all of our product information, and it has our contact information. So if you want to try out our products, if you want to see our tracker tax studies, or if you want to contact us with questions, or even anything that you want to learn about Ghostery, it's all there at ghostery.com.
And it really just seems that in this world that we both share, in the world of technology, that it continues to move forward at breakneck speed. And although it's not been that long since we last spoke, I am amazed by just how much attitudes have changed and awareness around privacy is changing. And I think that's a trend that's just going to continue. So, but more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come back on the podcast and update us on some of those insights you found from that ad tracking research there. Thanks so much, Jeremy, for coming back on.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you for having me.
As ASOS, Walmart and Home Depot all won with well-optimized tracker stacks in that research. And the big losers from the report, I think, were Foot Locker, Urban Outfitters and Everlane, mainly because of those unnecessary trackers that were significantly slowing down page load time. So I cannot thank Jeremy Tilbin, president of Ghostery, for coming back on the podcast and sharing insights about some of the data and its implications for retail leaders. If you are a retailer listening to this, let me know your thoughts on some of the topics we talked about. And obviously, if you're a user being frustrated by these slow loading times, let me know if you give Ghostery a try. And if it did indeed improve your experience. If it did, let me know. Great. If it didn't, also let me know. I really want to hear more about your experiences, especially after listening to the conversation today, because we can give problems, we can give solutions, but unless we all try them and give it a go, we're not going to know if they are better or not. So please, any questions, anything at all, your insights, send them over to me on email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter and all social media channels, Neil C. Hughes. And if you want to work with me, pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. I can work with you to outsource your business blogs and launch your own podcast. And if you don't want any of that, that's fine too. You can check out all the 1,050 odd episodes that we've recorded. But that's it for me. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.